Yeah, so we developed simulation training, and that I was a pilot before I was a dentist, and I worked out about 10 years ago that if we train pilots the way we train dentists, all the pilots would be dead. So if you look at how a dentist trained, they're trained with a lot of theory, very few demonstrations, and then very, very tiny number of repetitions, and then they basically get sent to work it out on their own, on their patients. In aviation, you try and do the training in as realistic a situation, you practice disasters, and you are practicing under pressure. So we just copied that. We manufacture mannequins, we've built a software platform allowing us to do this. And so we can train dentists in high repetition procedures in their own office, with their own handpiece, their own materials, and so on.
Hello everyone, Brian Kaleo here, Director of Dykema's DSO Industry Group. I'm here with my co-host, Matt McGaw, and this is the DSO Technology Show. This will be the last episode of the DSO Technology Show where Matt is a single man. He's getting married this weekend, and look, we wish him luck in that endeavor. But we also have an important guest here today. We've got Dr. Lincoln Harris, good friend of mine. He is the founder, CEO of Ripe Global, and it's an organization I've been watching very, very closely, and we're really, really excited to have you here. So Link, thanks for being here today.
Brian, thank you so much. It's always fun catching up with you, and we're here to give Matthew all sorts of wise advice on his upcoming mutuals, and maybe we'll talk about DSOs as well.
Yeah, I don't know. He's in a tough spot here this weekend. I don't know what, look, I think most of the folks that watch our show expect us to get right into technology. But Matt, you're in a tough spot here with this marriage. But otherwise, we just kind of got to get started. So, Link, let me ask you this. The premise here, and I like it a lot, is that it's very hard throughout the DSO industry and throughout, group practices, often to ask dentists to work, extra hours, to work weekends, evenings. I mean, in other industries, that's kind of the standard. If you've got demand, you're going to do that. But often that's been a challenge in the dental industry just because, these professionals have autonomy. They're free to do what they want. And it's often been a challenge to get them to sort of expand their hours. So the premise is, what if, okay, we're not going to ask you to work additional hours, but we're going to squeeze more productivity out of the time that you do have. And that's, to me, what it looks like Ripe Global's really doing right now in the marketplace. So maybe give us just some background on that and how this all came to be in the United States.
To some extent, some of this problem was self-inflicted because there was a period of time where people doing roll-ups of practices sold the dream of work-life balance to dentists. That sounds like a great idea, but the problem is that you talk too much about life and not enough about work, then you end up with a whole bunch of what you might call lifestyle dentists who go, I don't want all the hassle of working in a practice, it's too hard. I'm just going to cruise by working in a DSO. So I think they've backtracked from that, but in the early days of the DSO industry, that was a selling point, and it's come back to bite them.
I mean, do you think that's what the problem is? I mean, I want to stop on that because I hear people over and over and over again tell me, in DSOs, on stage, I've talked about this, I can't get the dentist to work more hours. If I had a different business, I'd just run another assembly line. I'd hire people and they'd work. I can't add another shift. I can't get the dentist to work. So let me ask you that. Do you agree that that is sort of the state of play, and why is it that way?
I don't think it's the state of play. If it was so simple to solve this problem, everyone would have done it before us. And it's not a simple problem to solve. It requires quite a few different things happening at the same time. My point was that in the early days of the DSO roll-ups, that was the dream that was sold, that you are coming to work here because it's lifestyle and you don't have all the stress. And of course, the flip side of that is that lack of stress means you're less productive. When you are a practice owner, and I've been a practice owner, and I've also worked with DSOs. When you're a practice owner, there is a hardcore driving force called a mortgage and rent. And if you don't pay the mortgage, you go bankrupt. And that level of drive, you are never, ever going to get as an employee, ever. It's just impossible. And so that hardcore ambition or just survival you cannot get as an employer. And I've seen that not just in dentistry, I've actually also seen it in my own business as Ripe Global, where we've transitioned people from big company executive positions into, small scrappy startup where you don't have AAA credit rating and so on. And sometimes they can't handle that transition because it is just hardcore grind as versus, we might have to fire some of the people in my team. That's the worst that can happen. Like I've had someone say, it's the same, I might have to fire 10 people if I don't perform. And I'm going, yeah, that's not the same as going bankrupt and you get restricted as a director for the next 5 years, So there is that level. But the reason it is difficult to solve this issue is it's not just one. It is a whole range of things that you have to solve simultaneously, including the way the DSO behaves. So we get good results, but one of the things that we do is we insist that the DSOs act in a certain way. So the tricky part for them is they're often going, we want to be nice to the dentist because if we're not nice, we lose the dentist. And the most expensive thing in a DSO is churn. So depending on which, I talked to a DSO recently, their number is $150,000. If we lose a dentist, it costs $150,000 to the EBITDA.
I mean, you got a headhunter fee potentially. You've got lost productivity. You've got ramp up time for the new associate before they're profitable. So all that together, yeah. I mean, I think that number sounds about right to me.
That balance between wanting to be nice and wanting to get productivity is a tough one with someone who is an autonomous professional whose highest calling is not your employer, but it's actually the dental board. Your employer can take away your job. The dental board can take away your career. So that is a difficult thing to do. And then going back to the more hours thing, and I've been a pretty productive dentist. When I stopped clinical practice, I was billing about $2,000 to $3,000 an hour on average. But you cannot sustain, well, I personally could not, and I work pretty hard out. I work long hours in this current role. I could not sustain that level of intense activity 5 days a week. So I could do it 4, but I couldn't do it 5. And when I went to 5, the drop in my productivity was so extreme that it offset the extra day. So there is kind of this sweet spot for not the dentist, but the square feet. So if you think of a dentist, if a dentist sits in 1 chair instead of 2, they use half the number of square feet. If they can be really productive in 1 chair without having to chair hop across 5 chairs, if capital efficiency per square foot is very, very high. So to some extent, if they have to work slightly shorter hours and higher productivity, then that works out better for both the dentist because they get more free time, and also for the DSO if they manage it correctly, because they can have 2 dentists filling 1 chair who are both extremely productive rather than 1 dentist who fills 2 chairs and unproductive. The reason that's not so easy to implement though is you have to have a deep understanding of the value of different procedures and how much difference that can actually make. So it's not inherently obvious to someone who's not from dentistry that a dentist could earn $2,000 an hour or $3,500 an hour by changing their procedure mix and building skills.
I mean, I've been following this concept very closely the last 6 months because you're right. It was lost on me as well for a while till I started, drilling down into it. But you can have a completely full schedule and be marginally profitable. And then you could have a half full schedule and be killing it if you've got the right mix of procedures, is what I've learned, Link. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, in fact, one of the things we battle with is people with full schedules. And even worse than being marginally profitable, you can actually have a full schedule and be unprofitable. So wow. In different DSOs, the number is different, but in every country in the world, there's basically a baseline monthly figure for a full-time dentist. And if they earn below that, the dentist still makes a profit because they get their commission. If the dentist does $1, they get, 27 cents or something after lab fees. But below a certain figure, the DSO makes no profit. Now, on average in the United States, that's around about $60,000 a month. And so if you have a dentist who's fully booked and they're generating $42,000 a month, the dentist's probably still earning $150,000, $160,000 a year. But the DSO is actually burning cash every single month on that dentist. It can be worse than marginally profitable. It can be quite unprofitable. And if you look across every DSO, there are a group of dentists, maybe the bottom 10 or 20% who are losing money. There's a whole bunch in the middle who are marginally profitable, and almost all of their EBITDA comes from the top 10 to 15% of the dentists. So it's a tiny fraction that are generating all of their EBITDA.
So Matt, I know, look, you're contemplating those upcoming nuptials. I know it's tough and you're sitting there in quiet contemplation, but we got to get you back into this discussion. So I know you've been thinking a lot about this. What are your thoughts on, the idea that, you can have a full schedule and actually lose money versus you could have a partially full schedule and be amazingly profitable and everything in between? Because that's what we're sort of talking about with this.
Yeah, absolutely, and appreciate all the wonderful words about my nuptials. I'm excited about the weekend for sure. Link, let me tell me if this is right. So it seems like the individuals that are coming out of school that are ready to be dentists seem a bit less motivated to work those hours than maybe, 10, 20 years ago. Along with that, we have the growing consolidation that is going to continue to occur at these DSOs. Like, how are you thinking you're going to influence these folks? Because they're not going to have the mortgage thing that's pushing them, like you discussed. They're going to be at these DSOs for the most part. I don't know what the percentage is, but a large percentage of doctors are going to go into a DSO because those DSOs are now increasing in size, right? How do you fuel them? How do you make them feel that pressure or change their mindset to want to make more of an impact, want to work more hours, want to see more patients, and also obviously want to be more profitable inside these DSOs? You probably don't have the magic bullet, but I assume you're working on this daily.
Yeah, I mean, we, like the last two groups we've just finished pilots with, one group their dentists have lifted 74%. So it's like $1,300 a day.
Within the same hours, Link? I mean, within the same amount of workday, same workday, yeah.
Yeah, like 74, the actual average billing hour, which is the metric I care about most from a financial, obviously we care about patient care and the dentist enjoying their job more, because we get a lot of dentists who are going to quit and then we show them a way to enjoy dentistry. But the key financial metric you look at is actually average billing hour. And it's actually, if you want to be really hardcore, it's average billing hour per chair used, because a dentist who uses 3 chairs is less capitally efficient than a dentist who uses 1 chair. And I'm not saying that dentists should use 1 chair, but if you do a massive procedure that takes 5 hours, you don't have to jump across chairs, you just use 1. So we do have, I wouldn't say a magic bullet, we have worked extremely hard and failed at a lot of things to get to the point where we get these results of, first group, they're up $1,300 a day, same number of hours. The next group that's coming along was halfway through a program with us and they were up, I think, $800 a day, and they're about to go to wider rollout. And, some of the other groups nearly doubled their productivity. And so the things that matter, first of all, communication skills. So this very complex issue where all across the industry, people don't want to be seen to sell. And you cannot escape selling if you charge money, because the definition of selling is you exchange a good or a service for money. So unless you're working for free, you are selling. Brian sells, you sell, everyone sells unless it's free. It matters not whether you sell or not, it's simply, are you good at it or bad? And the problem we have in this profession, first of all, is that people think good sales is bad. A really good salesperson, you don't even feel the sale. They're just helping you out. Like, they're really good at their job. They listen to what you need. They're honest. They get things done and they help you out. So like, why do we work with Dykema Law Firm? Because Brian does that. Like, he gets shit done and he's a really helpful dude. And so that's actually selling the law firm to us, but it has never ever felt like it. And so, but the idea that everyone has in their heads in dentistry is that selling is high pressure, sleazy, financially motivated. And that's actually just bad sales. Like, if you do that, the reason they equate that to used car sales is because used car salespeople are really bad salespeople. They're not good enough to get a better job. So they're like down selling, a Beta Toyota to some university kid that's got 900,000 miles on the clock. So the idea of what we think of sales in the entire profession is just actually completely wrong. So that's one problem. So getting people to be able to communicate and sell. If you can't sell a procedure, you actually never get good at it, because to get good, you have to do repetition. So if you can't sell it, then you can't do it. And so they get stuck in this like cycle where they can't sell it, so they never do enough to get good. And because they're no good, they can't sell it and they're like stuck. So that's where you need we need a lot of support from DSOs. What I've learned in this, that's like one part, and then you actually have to be able to do the procedure. So it's not just that you can sell it, and this is where a lot of communication and sales in dentistry goes wrong, is they teach people to sell, but then the dentist can't do the procedure because it's an advanced procedure. And your question about people don't want to work and they graduate poorly, you know, Aristotle has writings where he complained about how lazy young people are. So, you know, people at their peak of their career have been complaining about young people since like writing was invented. So this is completely normal, I think. But there was obviously some weirdness in COVID and who knows what. Everyone got ADHD in COVID. But people are definitely graduating with less skill because the degree for dentistry is the same length as it was nearly 200 years ago when dentistry was invented. But dentistry is like super complicated. Like 180 years ago, there was two things you had to know, which was extractions and gold and amalgam, three things. And maybe ivory dentures if you treated the president of the United States in the middle of a war. So, okay, four things, okay? So you had to know four things. They didn't have a lot of 3D printers when, you know, Abraham Lincoln was trying to fight off the South and stuff like that. So we have a situation now where dentistry is a 1,000 times more complex and sophisticated. The knowledge base is 1,000,000 times or probably 1,000,000,000 times bigger, and the dental degree is the same length.
So it's gotten a lot more complicated, you know, but the length of education time is the same. So it makes it difficult probably for people getting out to learn the full scope of everything they need to learn. When you needed to learn 10 topics and you had 4 years, you know, you probably could do it. If you got to learn 50 topics in 4 years, you know, you might do it, but you're going to get an overview of all 50 versus a deep dive into them the way you could do when it was 10 topics. I mean, that's what it sounds like, you know, to me. But if there's a way, Link, and this is what I want to focus sort of the remainder of our time on, if there's a way to squeeze more productivity out of dentists, you know, within the same amount of time once they're out of school and they're working at a DSO or a group practice or something, that's basically comes down to free money because it's the same overhead, it's the same amount of hours, but it's greater productivity. And of course, you're doing it in a proper ethical way. It's just these folks have become more competent and quicker in what they do, if I'm understanding it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to grow productivity in dentists, it is simply the type of procedure times the speed. And so type of procedure, people pay more for complex things than simple things. They do that in law, they do it in dentistry, they do it in surgery, they do it everywhere in the entire world. So in dentistry, if you do an implant or you do a crown or you do orthodontics, you get paid more per hour than if you do a checkup and a filling. And then on top of that, if you do a complex case where you're doing 5 teeth on the same patient instead of 1 tooth, the efficiency, the local anesthetic time is the same. The sterilization and cleaning the chair is the same. In fact, it's not just that your overhead is the same, it actually goes down because if you're doing 5 teeth, you can just sit in one chair for maybe 2 hours instead of if you're trying to do 5 crowns on 5 different patients, you've got to jump backwards and forwards between 2 chairs.
No, I mean, it's a basic thing. I mean, you could see this with home renovations, of which I've done a lot of. I haven't done any, you know, cavities or anything. I'm not a dentist, but I've done a lot of home renovations. And if you got the painter and the painter's going to come and they're going to put their tarp down and they're going to set everything up and you're going to do one wall, if you're like, can you do 4 more walls while you're there? The cost is marginal because they've already laid all their stuff out. They've put the tarp down. They've done everything versus if you said, please come do this, do 1 wall, go home, and then come back next week and do the second wall. It's not going to be anywhere near as efficient as the expression I've used is you're there, you're there. If they're there, they're there. And they're easy, you know, they can easily take on a few additional tasks once they've cleaned the chair, blocked the chair time, used the anesthetic, and they're already in there. That's the concept you're describing.
Yeah, and it's not like you need to do unnecessary treatment. Like we come across most patients are undertreated. And they're undertreated because, like at dental school, the one thing I would say about dental school is that there's a bunch of people who are more focused on public health and on, you know, being anti-interventionist or anti-procedural in a procedural profession. So people actually graduate. It's not only that they don't get trained that well, but they graduate with an anti-procedural bias in a procedural profession, which I think is just a horrific thing to do to a new graduate. So if you take them from that to being, okay, dentistry is actually good for people. So that's the first, I know it sounds ridiculous, but you have to get them to the point where dentistry is good for people, not bad. Then you make them confident to communicate that. And then you give them the skills to do it. And then you teach them the deep confidence and the endurance to do more complex cases. Now, the endurance one is interesting. To some extent, like we use simulation training because, it's what they use in pilots. They use it in every dangerous industry where they have to get good results. But, to some extent, a lot of the methods we use really are kind of borrowed from the military. Like if you want someone to be good at stripping their rifle under the pressure of being shot at, how do you get them to do that? Well, you just make them strip the rifle down and put it back together hundreds of times until they can do it essentially with their eyes closed. And so that's all we do, is we use an entire simulation platform that we can build that level of unconscious skill.
Yeah, because Matt, what they used to say, or they still say, and when I learned, everybody knows I used to wrestle and stuff. You start out being, unconsciously incompetent. You're flailing away. You got like no clue. You don't even know. Then you're consciously incompetent, meaning you've learned. You're like, oh, I'm not doing it right, but I know I'm not doing it right, and let me try to figure it out. Then you become consciously competent, where you're doing it correctly, but you got to keep on top of it. You got to pay attention, and maybe you're slower, but you're doing it correctly. And then what Link is saying, where you want to be is you want to be unconsciously competent. You're not even thinking about it, and everything you're doing is correct. So Matt, I think, and I want you to chime in here, if you need the treatment, and it's clear you need the treatment, the patient needs to be treated. Obviously, we've got the oral systemic link. If you've got problems and they go undiagnosed, in addition to dentistry problems, they can create all kinds of health problems. So I think if you need the treatment, they should be treated. And if you can do it quicker, more efficiently, within the same amount of time, Matt, I think it's an easy way to kind of increase revenue and EBITDA and enterprise value.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought you said something interesting that I've never heard before, Link, is you said that these dentists are coming out of school being taught to be anti-procedures, to be against actually treating, to finding a way to not treat a patient, any way except that. Is that accurate? And I think the second part too, that I think is interesting, me as a patient, Brian as a patient, when we go to a dentist, we sit down and I expect them to sell me something. I expect them to provide me a solution to whatever issues I may have inside my mouth to have better health. So the expectation is that I should have something done, probably, which I think is for a salesperson, which I've been in my career, it's that's great. That this person already knows that they want to buy something from me. And it seems to me like they should have this mindset of wanting to sell and wanting to do a procedure that's going to provide a really good outcome. Maybe the last, it's kind of a comment / question. I've just never understood why, and you tell me why there isn't some sort of at least semester inside dental school that teaches individuals how to communicate effectively about procedures that they have to do. A lot there for me to unpack. Take that wherever you like to take it. I think it's interesting. I've never heard somebody say anti-procedural that. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, so obviously there's a whole bunch of people who are focused on minimally invasive dentistry, but it's become somewhat of a cult whereby if you do anything invasive. So with minimally invasive dentistry, what they're talking about exclusively is the size of the invasiveness. So if you're doing a filling, it's like a tiny filling. The second part of minimally invasive, which is ignored, is that you don't have to do something invasive often. And so you will even hear people say things like, well, it's okay that it failed because the restoration failed, not the tooth. And you go, in no part of the real world will a patient accept that as a good outcome. The patient doesn't want either the restoration or the tooth to fail for a really long time. And part of it is, I'm going to get in trouble here, but there are some people who end up in academia because private practice was too stressful for them.
No, but we have that in the law too, though. I don't think that, of things you can say, I don't think that's controversial. Private practice is not for everybody. We have that with certain lawyers that don't do well in law firms, but like academia. I have seen it in dentistry too, where, just the hassle, the stress of running their own office wasn't to their liking, so they went into academia. I mean, I think it's a known phenomenon. I don't think it's controversial.
Those who can't do, teach.
I mean, I teach and I think I can do, but, I don't teach in the same way that normal, businesses are. And also, to be fair, we have quite a few dental schools that are reaching out to us wanting to use our platform and our methodology, over the coming years to accelerate, because what we have shown and what is possible is that you can get a dental student from zero to highly competent. Like, I've told Brian this, and we're going to test it out at some point. I could train Brian to do a crown prep very efficiently in less than probably 2 or 3 days.
Let's do it.
We got to run that through the compliance department. He's
Not
trying
on
to
a
get me to
patient.
do it. That's a
Next
whole
year on
ball of
stage
wax.
at Dykema, Brian Kaleo.
Yeah.
I mean, believe me, that's got to run by compliance. I don't know about all that. He thinks he's going to do it on a model or a dummy, one of those like crash test dummy type things. Maybe that's not dentistry if you're doing it on a dummy, but I don't know about that. But he makes this claim. He thinks I can like do a crown or something. I don't know.
The main thing that actually holds people back is just if they don't have the vision, the loops, that can make it difficult.
Well, look, we have a few minutes left. What I want to do really is just, we don't do infomercials here, but I want everybody to understand the value add of your platform. And this has been a really great discussion on some of the challenges of getting additional productivity out of associates in the DSO context or group practice context. And that's what we're here. That's what we're talking about today. But tell us a little bit, it's okay, Link, in the last couple minutes, tell us a little bit about Ripe Global and what the value add is and how you do it.
Yeah, so we developed simulation training, and that I was a pilot before I was a dentist, and I worked out about 10 years ago that if we train pilots the way we train dentists, all the pilots would be dead. So if you look at how a dentist trained, they're trained with a lot of theory, very few demonstrations, and then very, very tiny number of repetitions, and then they basically get sent to work it out on their own, on their patients. In aviation, you try and do the training in as realistic a situation, you practice disasters, and you are practicing under pressure. So we just copied that. We manufacture mannequins, we've built a software platform allowing us to do this. And so we can train dentists in high repetition procedures in their own office with their own handpiece, their own materials, and so on. And so this has several benefits. First benefit is the implementation from a training to a patient is faster because it's more similar. If you have a mannequin on a chair where you normally work and the next day you have a patient, the transition is really easy. You're not coming back from like some Hilton Garden Inn in the outskirts of Atlanta with a bench top model and a handpiece with no water spray because it makes a mess on the carpet. Like, there's nothing realistic about the way we train normally. And then secondly, while theory is good, we're big on practice. You can't repetitions. I know it's not sexy, but like you never go on stage to be a concert pianist without practicing the piano over and over again. Yet in dentistry, we essentially go into a concert treating a patient with almost no repetitions, and we try and learn the music in front of the crowd. It's kind of silly. So that combination has allowed us. We didn't really discover that this is perfect for DSOs until later on. We built the system just to solve some problems. And then later on we went, wow, these big businesses, they're really struggling to ship all their dentists to facilities that were never built for scaled dentistry. They were built for individual owner doctors who have a mortgage and want to learn high level, very boutique, luxury retreat in the desert type procedures. And that works great for individual doctors who own a practice and they're that super ambitious, driven person who has the courage to start a practice in the first place. Doesn't work if you're trying to ship 200 dentists at a time who just come out of dental school. You can't send them off to some luxury retreat in the desert because one, they don't want to leave at that age, and two, you just don't get return on investment. Like, we are picking up groups right now, one after the other, that are, used to have contracts with really famous big institutes, but those institutes were just never built for scale dentistry. And one thing, and you probably know this, Brian, I only just discovered this, the consolidation of dental practices into DSOs is the fastest growing health sector of any kind in the world right now.
Yeah, we kind of knew that one for a while over here, but I mean, what you're doing fits really, really well with that consolidation. It absolutely does. So all right. So Matt, let you kind of have the last word. I mean, this has been an incredible, just discussion about obviously the problem of associate productivity, a potential solution, and the benefits for a DSO. But Matt, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down on this? I really like what Link is doing here at Ripe Global.
Yeah, absolutely. Thumbs up. I think from my perspective, and Brian, you work with technology companies, you work with DSOs, and as well as myself, you can implement this amazing, let's just say AI solution in this day and age that can pump in new patients, that can do a lot of different exciting things. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you don't have doctors that can produce the revenue, those technology solutions are just not, they're useless. So what you guys are solving, I've been paying attention behind the scenes, and Link, you and I have chatted just the one time besides today. What you're doing is probably the most important thing out there, is making sure these doctors are trained and making sure that they can produce revenue to have, you know, enterprise value inside of these DSOs, regardless of the technology that they try and implement that Brian and I talk about. So love what you guys are doing. Looking forward to seeing, you know, where this thing goes. And thanks a lot for coming on, man.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, so Link, as we wrap up, if somebody's interested in learning more about Ripe Global or booking some type of consultation to see if it works, how do they do that?
They can email me at lincoln.harris@ripeglobal.com, or they can go through the website, ripeglobal.com, or they can contact me on Instagram. I don't really care what platform they contact me on. They can send a message to you, Brian, and they can get my phone number from you. I probably won't give it out here because I'll get spam texts from some auto AI generated bot. We don't mind. And I've got a really good team building up here in the US. We have, for the first time in the history of our company, this like really stressful problem, which is that the amount of demand coming down the pipeline is insanely large. And, you know, building the resources up to meet that demand is actually amazing. It's an amazing problem to have, but seeing demand the way once America likes a product and it turns on demand, it's a whole, when you're from another country, this is unbelievable. It's just like boom. So that's my stress has gone from not enough demand to
Good problem.
insane levels in a very short period of time. So
Well, everybody's got insane levels of stress. Matt's getting married this weekend, so we understand that. You've got it on your business. I've got the Dykema conference coming up here in about 6 weeks, so everybody's got to manage their stress. But Link, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Really enjoyed hearing more about Ripe Global, and I'm looking forward to seeing great things from you in the future. So everyone, on behalf of this has been the DSO Technology Show, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.